I'm Tom Harlan, a 68-year-old retired Navy veteran, married to Ellen for 38 years. We built our life together in this quiet Seattle suburb, raising our son Derek and watching him grow into a man. But now, Ellen was gone, taken too soon by illness, and I stood alone at her graveside on that rainy afternoon. The Pacific Northwest drizzle soaked through my coat, mirroring the grief that weighed on my shoulders. Family and friends had gathered for the service, murmuring condolences, but as the crowd thinned, Lena, my daughter-in-law, approached me with a determined stride. Her eyes were hard, her umbrella shielding her from the rain but not from her own bitterness. "Leave this house forever, it's time for you to go," she said, her voice sharp and unyielding, cutting through the patter of raindrops on the ground. She had always been ambitious, pushing Derek toward bigger opportunities, but now she saw me as an obstacle. To her, I was just a frail widower, scraping by on a modest pension in our $750,000 waterfront home overlooking Puget Sound. The house Ellen and I had cherished for decades, with its creaky wooden floors and views of the ferries gliding by, suddenly became a prize in her eyes. She assumed my days were filled with nothing but quiet mourning, shuffling around the empty rooms. But Lena had no clue about the life I'd led before retirement. She didn't know about the classified submarine missions I'd commanded deep in the Pacific, navigating treacherous waters under the weight of national secrets. Nor did she realize the tech patents I'd quietly licensed to Silicon Valley firms over the years, innovations born from those high-stakes operations that now generated steady, hidden income. I kept it all under wraps, not out of secrecy, but because Ellen and I valued our simple life. As Lena turned away, expecting compliance, I felt a resolve building inside me. This wasn't just about a house, it was about legacy, and I wasn't about to let her rewrite ours. After that confrontation at Ellen's graveside, I returned to the house alone, the rain still drumming against the windows like a persistent reminder of unfinished business. Lena's words echoed in my mind, but I pushed them aside, focusing on what needed to be done. Our waterfront home in Seattle's suburbs felt emptier than ever without Ellen's laughter filling the rooms, but it was still a sanctuary. Derek and Lena lived nearby in their own place, but they visited often enough to keep tabs on me, or so they thought. While they assumed my daily walks along Puget Sound were just aimless grieving, shuffling steps of an old man lost in memories, the truth was far different. Those walks were my way of staying connected to a network I'd built over decades, one that Lena and even Derek knew nothing about. Each morning, after a simple breakfast of coffee and toast on the porch overlooking the water, I'd lace up my boots and head out. The path wound along the shoreline, where the salt air carried hints of the sea that had defined so much of my life. I'd stop at benches or coffee stands, but it wasn't random. I was networking with former crew members from my Navy days, men who'd served under me on those classified submarine missions. Over the years, many had risen through the ranks or transitioned into civilian roles, leading cybersecurity startups or consulting for defense contractors. We'd exchange updates, brief, coded conversations about tech advancements or old missions, keeping our bonds tight without drawing attention. One such walk took me to a small park near the ferry terminal, where I met up with Mike, a lieutenant from my last command. Now in his 50s, he ran a firm specializing in secure data encryption. "Tom, good to see you out here," he'd say, handing me a thermos of coffee as we sat watching the waves. We'd talk shop, how AI was changing naval tactics or the latest threats from state actors. It kept my mind sharp, and in return, I'd share insights from my patents, quiet inventions like improved sonar algorithms that I'd licensed anonymously to Silicon Valley outfits. The income from those deals supplemented my pension nicely, but I never flaunted it. Ellen and I had agreed. Live modestly, give back where it mattered. Derek and Lena, though, saw only the surface. Derek, my only son, worked as a mid-level accountant downtown, buried in spreadsheets and commutes. He'd call to check in, asking if I was eating right or if the house was too much to maintain. "Dad, maybe it's time to downsize," he'd suggest gently, but I could hear Lena's influence in his tone. She was the ambitious one, always eyeing upgrades, a bigger car, fancier vacations. To them, I was just the grieving father-in-law, puttering around the garage with half-finished projects, leaving tools out as if my memory was fading. But one evening, everything shifted. I'd come home from a longer walk, my coat damp from an unexpected shower, and settled into my study, a small room off the living room filled with nautical charts and old logbooks. Ellen had called it my war room, a place for quiet reflection. I was reviewing some emails from a patent lawyer when I noticed something off. My home network, which I'd secured myself years ago with Navy-grade protocols, showed unusual activity. A quiet alert on my screen, unauthorized access attempts on Derek's inheritance account, the one Ellen and I had set up for him years ago, seeded with proceeds from my early licenses. Curiosity turned to concern. I traced the logs carefully, my fingers moving over the keyboard with the precision of old submarine controls. It wasn't hackers from abroad, the IP led to a local address I recognized, Lena's boutique downtown. My heart sank as I dug deeper. Over the past 6 months, small transfers had been siphoned out, totaling thousands. Not just pressuring me for the house sale to cover costs, as I'd suspected. No, her desperation ran deeper. Records showed payments to offshore sites, gambling platforms, high-stakes poker and slots that promised quick wins but delivered ruin. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glowing screen. Lena's failing boutique was public knowledge. She'd launched it with fanfare, selling artisanal clothes online, but sales had dipped. Now this, a secret gambling debt that could bankrupt them both. Derek's inheritance, meant for his future, maybe starting a family or securing retirement, was being drained to feed her habit. I thought of Ellen, how she'd worry about family fractures like this. But I wasn't ready to confront them yet. Instead, I documented everything, screenshots and timestamps, building a file in an encrypted folder. My walks would continue, but now with purpose. I'd reach out to more contacts, quietly gathering advice on how to protect what was ours without tearing the family apart. The next day, as fog rolled in over the sound, I met another old crewmate, Sarah, who'd become a financial advisor for veterans. Over sandwiches at a harborside deli, I shared what I'd found, not names, just the situation. "Sounds like fraud in the family," she said matter-of-factly. "Get your proof solid, Tom. You've got the skills." She was right. My hidden background wasn't just about past glories, it was a toolkit for the present. Lena thought she held all the cards, demanding I leave the house to fund her schemes. But as I walked home that evening, the ferries cutting through the mist, I knew the real power lay in the shadows I'd kept for so long. This wasn't over. The discovery of Lena's siphoning hit me harder than I expected, but it sharpened my focus. Days blurred into a routine of quiet vigilance in our Seattle home, the sound of gulls outside my window a constant backdrop. I'd spend mornings in the study, monitoring the accounts with tools I'd picked up from my Navy tech days, simple scripts that flagged anomalies without alerting anyone. Derek called occasionally, his voice laced with concern, but I kept my responses neutral, asking about his work instead of prying. Lena, though, grew bolder in her visits, dropping by unannounced with casseroles or helpful suggestions about selling the house. She painted it as practicality, but I saw the calculation in her eyes. Her boutique, Lena's Loft, had been her pride, a chic spot downtown selling handmade scarves and jewelry, targeted at young professionals via social media. But trouble had brewed for months. I'd overheard snippets during family gatherings, a viral post accusing her of misleading customers about product origins, claiming imported goods as local. The scandal exploded online, with influencers calling out the fakes and reviews plummeting. Sales tanked overnight, her Instagram followers dropped by half, and the boutique's windows stayed dark more often than not. Desperation set in, and it showed in her demeanor, strained smiles, fidgety hands. To cope, Lena began whispering to Derek about me, planting seeds of doubt. One afternoon, as I returned from a walk, I found them in the kitchen, voices low. "Tom's been forgetful lately," she said, loud enough for me to hear through the door. Leaving tools in the garage, wandering off on those long strolls. What if he's not safe here alone? Derek hesitated, murmuring agreement, but I could tell he wasn't fully convinced. It was a subtle campaign, framing me as unstable to justify her push for the house. Our $750,000 waterfront property, with its prime view of Puget Sound, could fetch a quick sale, enough to bail out her boutique and cover those gambling debts I'd uncovered. But Lena's plans went further than whispers. Late one evening, after Derek had gone home, I heard her voice drifting from the living room phone. She'd left her device on the coffee table during a visit, thinking I was upstairs. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but curiosity, and caution, kept me rooted. She was on a call with someone, her tone urgent. "Yes, conservatorship is the way," she said. "The estate lawyer specializes in elder cases. He'll handle the paperwork to declare Tom incompetent." My blood ran cold. Conservatorship meant taking control of my affairs, forcing me out. She outlined her vision: flip the house into a trendy Airbnb, renting rooms to tourists with sound views, while shuttling me to a distant assisted living facility, some impersonal complex hours away, far from the life Ellen and I had built. I slipped away quietly, heart pounding, and retreated to my study. That night, I couldn't sleep, the rain tapping against the panes like accusatory fingers. The next day, I confided in an old contact, a retired JAG officer named Harlan, no relation, but a trusted friend from the service. Over a secure line, I described the call without specifics. "Sounds like she's building a case," he advised. "Document everything. And check your legal docs." That's when I dove into Ellen's old files, the ones we'd kept in a fireproof safe. What I found twisted the knife deeper. Lena had been in the house alone a few weeks back, supposedly helping clean out Ellen's closet. But amid the papers, I spotted discrepancies: a copy of Ellen's will, the one notarized years ago, leaving the house jointly to Derek and me, with provisions for equal shares. Yet, tucked in a folder, was another version, subtly altered. Dates shifted, language tweaked to favor a larger share for Derek, and by extension, Lena. The signature looked like Ellen's, but the notary seal was off, and a quick cross-check with records showed it forged. She'd turned what started as family concern, perhaps genuine worry about my well-being, into outright fraud. This wasn't just about money, it was betrayal, twisting Ellen's final wishes to line her pockets. I sat there, staring at the documents under the desk lamp, the weight of it all pressing down. Derek, oblivious or willfully blind, was caught in her web. My son, the boy I'd taught to fish on these very shores, now risked losing everything to her schemes. But I wasn't helpless. Drawing on my hidden background, I reached out to a cybersecurity buddy who'd gone private sector. "Run a deep scan on her devices," I asked, providing what I could ethically. He confirmed traces, searches for forgery templates, and conservatorship loopholes, all from her IP. As the week wore on, Lena's visits intensified. She'd bring printouts of assisted living brochures, casual as if discussing weather. "It'd be better for you, Tom," peaceful, with staff around the clock. I'd nod, playing along, but inside, resolve hardened. The boutique's failure had cracked her facade, the gambling debts were the fracture lines. She needed the house sale desperately. And now this forged will was her ace. But aces could be trumped. I began preparing quietly, updating my own will, alerting a trusted attorney, and looping in community friends who'd vouch for my sharpness. The Marina Association meeting loomed, a chance to shift the narrative, but for now, I watched and waited, the sounds tides a reminder that undercurrents could change everything. One evening, as sunset painted the water gold, Derek stopped by alone. "Lena's worried about you, Dad," he said, avoiding my eyes. I almost told him then, showed him the files, but held back. Timing mattered in submarine ops, and this felt like one. Instead, I shared a story from my Navy days, a minor tale of strategy, to remind him of my clarity. He left thoughtful, but the divide was growing. Lena's desperation was a storm building, but I'd navigated worse. This fight for our home, our legacy, was just beginning, and I intended to steer true. The tension in our Seattle home had thickened like the marine layer over Puget Sound, and I knew a reckoning was inevitable. It was a Friday evening when Derek suggested a family dinner, his voice tentative over the phone. Just the three of us, Dad. To talk things through. I agreed, sensing Lena's hand in it. Our waterfront property, with its wide windows framing the darkening water, had always been a place for honest conversations, but tonight felt charged. I prepared simply, roast chicken from the market, potatoes, and a salad, setting the table in the dining area that overlooked the sound. The ferry's lights twinkled in the distance as dusk fell, a serene backdrop to the storm brewing inside. Lena arrived first, carrying a bottle of wine and a folder under her arm, her smile tight. Derek followed, looking worn from his office day. We sat around the oak table Ellen and I had chosen decades ago, the one scarred from family meals and homework sessions. Small talk flowed at first, Derek's latest project at work, the neighborhood's new coffee shop, but Lena steered it quickly. Tom, we've been thinking about your situation, she began, sliding the folder across to me. Inside were printouts, fake medical reports, stamped with a doctor's name I didn't recognize. They claimed cognitive decline, memory lapses, disorientation, suggesting I needed protection through legal oversight. It's for your own good, she pressed, her eyes fixed on mine. The house is too big for one person. We can help manage things. Derek shifted uncomfortably, poking at his food, but said nothing. I set the papers down, my fork pausing mid-air. The room felt smaller, the sound's gentle lap against the shore the only sound for a moment. I'd anticipated this, prepared in my study the night before, pulling out documents from my safe. Not the forged will, that would come later, but proof of who I really was, beyond the widower they saw. Lena, I said evenly, before we go further, there's something you both should know. I stood and retrieved a framed photo from the mantel, me in uniform, younger, with my crew on a submarine deck. Beside it, I placed a certificate, yellowed but official, the Navy Cross, awarded for a daring Pacific rescue operation during my command years. The story spilled out then, controlled and factual, as if recounting a log entry. In '82, off the coast of Okinawa, our sub took damage in a storm. Communications failed, and we were drifting into enemy waters. I led a team to the surface in rough seas, signaling for help and coordinating an evac that saved 35 sailors. No fanfare, just the job. Those men weren't faceless, many had climbed high. Captain Reyes, one of them, runs Port Authority now. Another heads a drone manufacturer in Seattle. They've stayed in touch, offered opportunities. I pulled out emails, redacted but clear, consulting gigs, patent nods, that showed my mind was as sharp as ever. The tech licenses I'd mentioned before? They tied back to innovations from those missions, generating value quietly. Lena's face paled, her wine glass forgotten. That's impressive, Tom. But it doesn't change the reports. Derek, though, leaned forward, eyes wide. Dad, I had no idea. You never talked about this. The revelation hung there, shifting the air. But the real twist came from him. He set his napkin down, voice low. Lena's right about some things. I knew about her debts, the boutique's troubles, the gambling slips. I stayed silent out of fear, hoping it'd pass. But these forgeries? He glanced at her, pulling a USB drive from his pocket. I found them last week, hidden in her desk. Copies of Mom's will, altered. I didn't want to believe it. The room erupted in stunned silence, then Lena's protests, denials sharp as the knife beside her plate. Derek, how could you? This is a misunderstanding. But he shook his head, plugging the drive into my laptop on the side table. Files opened, the original will beside her version, discrepancies glaring, dates fudged, shares inflated to funnel more to her. Evidence of her consultations with that shady estate lawyer, emails plotting the conservatorship. My counter had forced his hand, the weight of my hidden strength, the Navy Cross gleaming under the light, broke his silence. He chose sides right there, not out of anger, but clarity. It's over, Lena. The manipulation ends tonight. I watched them, the father in me aching for Derek's turmoil, but proud of his stand. Lena gathered her things, face flushed, storming toward the door with promises of explanations later. This isn't protection, it's theft, I said calmly as she left, the door slamming behind her. Derek stayed, head in hands. We talked late into the night, the sound's foghorn a distant call. He confessed the full extent, how her boutique scandal had spiraled into debts, pressuring him to push me out. My revelation hadn't just defended the house, it rebuilt trust, exposing her schemes layer by layer. By morning, Derek had moved some files to a secure account, and we'd contacted my attorney. The confrontation, overlooking the water that had shaped my life, marked a turning point. Lena's fake reports lay discarded, my Navy honors a shield. But the fight wasn't won yet, the community, her public facade, those would test us next. As dawn broke over the sound, I felt Ellen's presence, guiding us through. Strength, quiet and enduring, had outmaneuvered the storm. The days after the dinner confrontation passed in a haze of strategy sessions with Derek, our waterfront home becoming a makeshift command center. We'd secured the documents, alerted authorities discreetly, but Lena didn't back down. She doubled her efforts, spreading whispers through neighborhood channels, texts to mutual friends, casual mentions at the local market, painting me as stubborn and out of touch. Derek urged caution, but I knew the next battleground, the Marina Association meeting, a staple in our Seattle suburb where I'd volunteered for over a decade. It was held at the community center overlooking Puget Sound, a modest hall with folding chairs and a projector screen, where residents discussed everything from dock repairs to environmental initiatives. I'd chaired committees on boat safety, drawing on my Navy experience without fanfare. Tonight, it would serve as more than that. I arrived early, the evening air crisp with salt from the water, parking my old truck in the lot dotted with sailboats. Neighbors greeted me warmly, old salts like me, families who'd known Ellen. "Tom, sorry about everything," murmured Mrs. Patel from across the street, squeezing my arm. I nodded, appreciating the support, but kept my focus. Derek sat beside me as the meeting kicked off, agenda items droning on, budget for new buoys, updates on ferry schedules. Then, as predicted, the door banged open halfway through. Lena burst in, breathless, her coat damp from the light drizzle outside. Heads turned, she scanned the room until her eyes locked on me. "Everyone, I need to speak," she announced, striding to the front without invitation. The chair, an old friend, yielded politely. "This is about our community," she began, voice pitched for drama. "Tom Harlan is hoarding that waterfront house out of delusional attachment. It's selfish, blocking progress for all of us. He wanders, forgets things, it's unsafe." She gestured wildly, citing incidents like my garage tools or solitary walks, framing it as concern for the neighborhood. Murmurs rippled, some nodded, unaware of the full picture. Derek tensed beside me, but I stayed calm, hands folded, letting her unravel her own thread. The room shifted when Captain Reyes stood, a tall man in his 60s, salt and pepper hair, one of the sailors I'd pulled from those Pacific waters decades ago. Now Port Authority Director, he commanded respect. "Lena, with respect, that's not the full story," he said, voice steady. He nodded to the tech guy running the projector, and slides flickered to life on the screen. "First, my patent portfolio, diagrams of sonar tech, encryption algorithms, licensed to firms like Boeing and startups in the valley. Values scrolled, millions in quiet revenue, proof of a mind still innovating. Tom's contributions go beyond this community," Reyes explained. These patents protect our ports, our waters. Gasps echoed as the slides shifted to Lena's boutique. Yelp reviews scrolled, 1-star ratings post-scandal, complaints of false advertising, unpaid orders. Lena's loft stared back, its facade cracked by public scrutiny. She flushed, stammering, "This is irrelevant, personal attacks." But Reyes held firm. "It's relevant when it ties to pressuring family for gain." The exposure stung, neighbors who'd shopped there exchanged glances, the viral social media fallout now community knowledge. Then came the twist that sealed it. Old Mr. Jenkins, a retired teacher from down the block, rose slowly. "Lena approached me last week," he said, voice clear. "Offered cash to say Tom's erratic, lie about seeing him confused on walks." The room hushed. She'd tried bribing him, promising it would help the neighborhood by freeing up the house. But Jenkins, principled as ever, had recorded the call on his phone, a habit from his teaching days. With the chair's nod, he played it, Lena's voice, smooth at first, then edged with threats. "If you don't help, I'll tell everyone you're the one causing issues around here." Her words hung in the air, raw and damning. Chaos followed. Lena's face drained of color, she backed toward the door, denying it all, doctored lies. But the recording's clarity brooked no doubt. Neighbors rallied, Mrs. Patel called out support for me, citing years of my volunteer work. Another shared how I'd fixed their boat dock gratis. Reyes wrapped it up, projecting Pentagon records verifying my service, tying back to the rescues that built his career. "Tom's no hoarder, he's a pillar." Derek stood then, voice firm, confirming the forgeries and debts, humanizing the mess without venom. Lena fled as the meeting dissolved into chatter, support flooding my way, handshakes, promises to testify if needed. Outside, under the center's lights reflecting on the sound, Derek and I walked to the truck. "That was her undoing," he said quietly. The community, once neutral, now saw her schemes, the bribes, the manipulations, all crumbling under scrutiny. My hidden background, once private, became a shield, the patents and honors proving worth beyond the house. As we drove home, the water dark and vast, I felt the tide turn. Ellen would have smiled at this, quiet strength exposing the fraud, binding us tighter. But Lena's desperation wasn't spent, rumors said she had one more play, public and reckless. We'd be ready. The community center exposure rippled through our Seattle suburb like a stone skipped across Puget Sound, but Lena refused to sink quietly. Whispers turned to outright avoidance. Neighbors who'd once chatted with her at the market now crossed the street. Derek and I fortified our home, the waterfront views a constant reminder of what we'd protected, but reports came in, she'd been calling local media, spinning tales of injustice. I dismissed it at first, desperation's last gasp, but then the invitation arrived via email, forwarded from a friend. A local radio show, Soundwave Stories, wanted her take on family disputes in changing neighborhoods. She was going on air from a coffee shop downtown, live at noon the next day. Derek urged me to ignore it, but I tuned in anyway, sitting in my study with the laptop open, the sounds fog rolling in outside. The broadcast started innocently enough, the host's voice warm and folksy. "Today, we're hearing from Lena Harlan, local entrepreneur facing a tough family situation." She launched in, her tone laced with victimhood, slurring slightly, perhaps nerves or that bottle of wine she'd stashed. "My father-in-law, Tom, is faking his veteran status to dodge taxes," she claimed, words tumbling out. "All those stories about submarines and medals? Fabricated to run a shadow empire from that hoarded house. He's unstable, hoarding patents and secrets while the family suffers." It was a wild escalation, twisting my Navy Cross into fraud, my quiet licenses into some illicit network. Listeners would picture a doddering con man, not the commander who'd saved lives. I gripped the desk edge, but stayed composed, texting Reyes a heads-up. The host paused, intrigued. "Strong accusations, Lena. Any proof?" She faltered, rambling about witnesses and documents, but it rang hollow. That's when the fact-check kicked in, live, as promised by the station's policy. The host pulled up sources on the spot, his voice shifting to neutral. Let's verify. Pentagon records show Thomas Harlan received the Navy Cross in 1983 for a Pacific rescue, 35 sailors saved. Confirmed. Lena interrupted, voice rising, it's all lies. He's manipulating everyone. But the damage mounted. The host continued, and on the Empire? Public filings list Harlan's patents licensed to legit firms, no tax dodges noted. Now, your boutique, Lena's Loft, IRS liens for unpaid vendors, per court docs. That's public too. Her slurring worsened, defenses crumbling into rants about the house as her right, the forgeries as misunderstandings. Callers flooded the lines, but the twist that broke her came midway. The host announced a caller, anonymous, deep voice. It was Derek, masking his tone but unmistakable to me. This is someone close to the situation, the host said. Derek spoke steadily, Lena's claims are fabrications. I've seen the forgeries she made of my mother's will, the bribes to neighbors. The debts from gambling and the boutique scandal, that's the real story. I disown her lies right now. Joint accounts frozen as of this morning, she's on her own. Gasps from the host, silence from Lena. Derek? Is that you? She sputtered, but he hung up, the line dead. The broadcast backfired spectacularly. Listeners poured in, support for me, outrage at her. Tom's a hero, we know him from the marina, one said. Another, heard about the community meeting, Lena's the one scheming. The host wrapped it, thanking callers, but news spread fast. By afternoon, police arrived at the coffee shop, tips from the show led to an arrest warrant for fraud, the forgeries, the bribes, all documented now. Lena was led out in cuffs, cameras flashing, her public meltdown immortalized online. Derek watched from our home, relief mixed with sorrow. She pushed too far, he said, as we viewed clips on the news. The fallout was swift. Her boutique shuttered for good, liens enforced. Community rallied harder, petitions for my privacy, offers of help. My hidden background, once shadowed, now shown as integrity. That evening, as sunset gilded the sound, I reflected on the day's chaos. Lena's panic had exposed everything, her slurred accusations crumbling under truth. Derek's call, brave and final, severed the ties. Arrested and alone, she faced consequences, but the real victory was ours, house secure, bond mended. Ellen's memory felt closer, her strength in our resolve. One more chapter left, but the storm had peaked that I and the weeks following Lena's arrest, our Seattle suburbs settled into a cautious peace, the waterfront home feeling like home again. Derek filed for divorce swiftly, the proceedings quiet but firm, citing the fraud and betrayals uncovered. He moved back in temporarily, his old room dusted off, and we rebuilt our bond over simple routines, morning coffee on the porch, walks along Puget Sound where I'd share more Navy stories, unfiltered now. The house, our $750,000 sanctuary, stayed ours, its views of ferries and waves a testament to Ellen's legacy. Neighbors dropped by with meals, their support unwavering after the radio debacle. Lena faced charges for forgery and attempted conservatorship fraud. But her lawyer negotiated a plea deal, no jail time, just community service, ironic, given her schemes. She vanished from the area, whispers saying she was starting over elsewhere, stripped of the boutique and debts. Derek and I followed the case from afar, a chapter closed without bitterness. Unexpectedly, I chose mercy. Through anonymous channels, old crew contacts, I funded a small startup loan for a reformed version of her business idea, something modest in ethical retail. Not pity, but a lesson in accountability. I'd seen enough in the Navy to know second chances built character. She never knew the source, but it felt right, echoing Ellen's forgiving spirit. The real twist came sorting Ellen's effects. In a hidden drawer of her jewelry box, I found a letter, dated her final weeks. Tom, families have flaws, love them through. Forgive, as I forgive you your silences. Tears came then, her words inspiring action. I channeled my network, Reyes, the patent execs, into a veterans tech incubator at the marina. Classes on cybersecurity, startup grants for ex-sailors, all overlooking the Sound where it began. Derek joined the board, our partnership renewed. Quiet strength outlasted betrayal, the house stood firm, legacy enduring.